Listening to the Jake Asman Show on the Sports Map Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
So the New York Yankees need a starting shortstop. Their GM, Brian Cashman, has said as much so far this offseason. The Yankees have been linked to talking to the agents for Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, and also Carlos Correa. Now, Carlos Correa is a great player. No one can dispute that, right? Carlos Correa is coming off a phenomenal season with the Houston Astros. But Carlos Correa earlier this week was on some sort of Spanish podcast, and in Spanish basically said that Derek Jeter didn't deserve any of the gold gloves that he won with the New York Yankees. Now, Derek Jeter won 5 gold gloves with the Yankees, and I could sit here and tell you that, maybe Derek Jeter wasn't worthy of winning all 5. But let me start with the obvious. The idea that Derek Jeter was a bad fielder, as if it's been portrayed by some in the media and some fans that just hate the Yankees so they love to take shots, is nonsense. Derek Jeter, you would want the ball hit to Derek Jeter in any big spot. He would make every routine play. He was clutch and made the big play when it mattered. Some of his biggest plays in his legendary Hall of Fame career were defensive plays. The flip against the A's in the 2001 Division Series, the diving into the stands against the Red Sox, the dive into the stands against the A's in 01 against, in the divisional round of the playoffs. Like, Derek Jeter had the jump throw. He was a good fielder. Now, we could say by the end of his career, maybe the Yankees just let him play shortstop because he was Derek Jeter. Okay, I'll listen to that. But Correa coming out of the blue and taking a pot shot at Derek Jeter, I mean, what are you doing, Carlos? Even if you don't want to go to the Yankees, you want them bidding on you, right? You want the Yankees to help drive up your price. So what he said from that standpoint was dumb. But I also don't think the Yankees will sign him. But it was just dumb, and I have no idea why Derek Jeter's even being mentioned in the conversation with Carlos Correa. But take a listen to this. This was Derek Jeter at the owners' meetings, asked to respond to Carlos Correa's comments on that Spanish-speaking podcast.
A couple of weeks ago, Carlos Correa of the Astros had mentioned that you weren't deserving of your gold glove.
Yeah.
I was wondering what you thought about that. And
I didn't think much about it. I don't know how my name came up. So my Spanish is not that good. I still haven't seen it. I don't know how my name was brought up, but it doesn't even warrant a response. I mean, I can go in a lot of different directions from that on.
That was the
Derek Jeter does not need to dignify Carlos Correa because Derek Jeter is above Carlos Correa. Derek Jeter's twice the player that Carlos Correa ever was. Correa can't stay on the field in his career. Jeter always played. There are 5 baseball players that ever had more hits than Derek Jeter. Period. The guy was one of the all-time great players. There was not a single baseball fan that could argue how good of a player Jeter was. It wasn't the numbers. It was all the intangible stuff on top of what he brought to the table. Not to mention the fact that Derek Jeter hit .310 in his career in the playoffs. So give me a break. Like, Derek Jeter's got 5 rings. Correa's got 1, and it's basically a tainted championship because the Astros were caught cheating. So I don't need to rip on Carlos Correa. Like, he's a really good player. I cover him up close here in Houston. But I found this to be really funny. Take a listen to Carlos Correa back in 2014 when asked who he idolizes.
My idol was Derek Jeter. I always follow him. I always look up to him because he was a great player, but he was a great person. So Derek Jeter is the person I always look up to.
Oh, would you look at that? Derek Jeter is the guy you always look up to. Yeah, that's right, because Derek Jeter is one of the all-time great winners in the history of sports. I mean, Derek Jeter is as good of a baseball player in his era as anyone. The guy was awesome. I can sit here and tell you he's one of the best players of all time, but he kind of was. There are 5 players that ever had more hits than him. All right, Derek Jeter maybe wasn't the best defender by the end of his career, but guess what? He still made every routine play. And he still was big in big spots defensively. So I just think Correa coming out of the blue here, taking the shot at Derek Jeter, that's not going to help the Yankees sign him. I don't think the Yankees are going to sign him. I think if they sign a big money shortstop, it's way more likely to be Corey Seager because he's left-handed, or Marcus Semien because it won't be a 10-year deal. But the Jeter defense stuff, I think, is so lazy. Ask any Yankee fan. There's nobody you'd rather the ball be hit to in a big spot than Jeter. Doesn't that mean you're a pretty good defender? You make the big play? Like, some of his biggest plays in his career were defensible. You know, it's funny. Correa says that Jeter didn't deserve any of his gold gloves. I think most people would say Correa doesn't deserve his only World Series ring. So, boom, it's even. I mean, give me a break. It's a bunch of nonsense. As far as Correa, though, going to the Yankees, I don't see that as something that happens. I really don't. I think it's way more likely Carlos Correa goes to the Detroit Tigers, the Texas Rangers, Seattle Mariners. I don't think the Yankees are going to go out there and give a 10-year contract to a shortstop. You got to know something about the Yankees. Their best position prospect, their best overall prospect, you could argue, is Anthony Volpe, who's a Jersey kid and might be their best homegrown prospect since Aaron Judge, or before that, maybe even Derek Jeter, they say. They think he's a shortstop. If you give Correa 10 years, Correa's value is that he's a good offensive player, but he's the best defensive shortstop in the sport. He led position players in WAR, not because of his hitting, because of his overall play. Like Carlos Correa has never had a year where he's hit over 30 home runs or has batted in over 100 RBIs. He's a great player because of everything he does, in addition to being an offensive hitter. If you give Correa 10 years, if you're the Yankees, where do you go from there with Volpe? You trade that guy away? Or do you sign Simeon or Seager? And then eventually you can move them over to third base, and then Volpe could play short. So I think that's something to keep in mind here. I do think the Yankees need to be aggressive in spending money on shortstop. I don't think it's going to be Carlos Correa. But getting back to his comments, I think what he said was stupid because even if you don't want to go to the Yankees, why say anything about Derek Jeter? Why piss off the Yankee fan? Like, I'm not saying that those comments prevent the Yankees from still signing Correa, because I don't think they necessarily do. But you have the cheating scandal where Correa wouldn't be well liked in that clubhouse right away anyway. Then you now have these comments. If the tiebreaker is, well, Corey Seager or Correa, one person took a shot at one of our most popular players ever, one person was on the 2017 Astros and the other player wasn't, they might go with Seager over Correa if it's that close. So from a business standpoint, Correa's comments were dumb because alienating the Yankee fan base, the biggest fan base in professional sports, is not smart if you're Carlos Correa. And I happen to actually think Correa provides an edge and the right attitude, like to make the Yankees the villain. I think they need some of that. But I don't think they're going to sign him because of the contract. And I think these comments about Jeter and him being on the cheating Astros in 2017, I think these are some negatives where if it's close between spend big bucks on Seager or spend big bucks on Carlos Correa, I have a funny feeling they would probably favor Seager in that case over going Carlos Correa. But I do get a kick out of the fact that 2014, Carlos Correa is asked, who's your idol? And who is his idol? His idol was Derek Sanderson Jeter.
My idol was Derek Jeter.
Boom!
I always follow him. I always look up to him because he was a great player, but he was a great person. So Derek Jeter is the person I always look up to.
You know what Derek Jeter would never do, Carlos? Go on a podcast and bash the most popular player in the history of a franchise that might be interested in signing you in free agency. It was stupid. It was a dumb decision by Carlos Correa. He's not going to be a Yankee in my mind, but maybe the Yankees don't make a bid now. And if you're trying to break Francisco Lindor's 10-year, $341 million contract, you might want the richest team in baseball to be in the mix. Just an idea, though. I'm not really good at math, and I'm not the smartest, but that's just an idea that I see. Now, it's interesting, because staying with Correa, Carlos Correa and A.J. Hinch, who manages the Tigers, but still lives here in Houston in the offseason, they had brunch the other day. Or they had breakfast that I guess spilled into lunch, but I don't know. Where I'm from, that's a brunch. A lot of people say, well, this means Correa's going to Detroit. Not necessarily. You know what that brunch means? That the Tigers are a candidate to sign him. But guess what? We knew that. That brunch wasn't breaking any news here. The Vegas odds to sign Correa before the pictures emerged of Correa and A.J. Hinch having brunch here in Houston, the Tigers were already the Vegas favorites to sign Carlos Correa. They already were. And if I'm the Tigers, and Brendan Riley, who's producing the show, could weigh in on this very conversation as well. If I'm the Tigers, I would sign Correa. I think they need that leader, that face of the franchise. And a Tigers lineup with Spencer Torkelson at first, and Jonathan Scope at second, and Akil Baddoo in the outfield with Riley Green and Robbie Grossman. Like, that is a really good lineup that is young and potentially going to get better with age.
I haven't seen excitement about a potential thing in all of Detroit sports, Jake, like I've seen excitement at the idea of Carlos Correa, because the Tigers overperformed last year. They weren't a playoff contender.
77 games after they won, what, like in the 40s the previous full season?
I want to say the Vegas over-under was 59.5. It might have been a little bit higher, but it wasn't even in the mid-60s. They were a team that convinced you they could compete for the playoffs with a big move or two. And I don't think there's a bigger move than Carlos Correa. Everybody in Detroit,
they want Correa.
They want him badly. Because people will be upset. No matter what else they do, people will be disappointed if Correa's not a target.
There's no concern that this is a guy that's like never been the greatest offensive player in the game?
I wouldn't say none, but the thing is, the Tigers are so, like, I think they spent like $70 million, $80 million last year.
And people want them to be relevant.
You can still pay Correa and be around league average in spending.
No doubt. No doubt about that. So ultimately, Correa, I don't think will be a Yankee, but Derek Jeter's response, perfect. Doesn't even warrant a response. That's how little Derek Jeter thinks of Carlos Correa. Also, I guess we could cross off the Miami Marlins as a team for Carlos Correa, as if we couldn't have done that anyway. Coming up, we got Quick Hits, a segment where we rapid fire through a bunch of different sports topics. That's coming up next right here on the Jake Asman Show, with you till 6 p.m. Eastern time here on SportsMap Radio.
The Jake Asman Show.